Hi, Steve, and thanks for joining us on the Cruxcast. How are you doing today?
Hey, Eric, thanks for the invitation. And I'm doing very well, actually, considering we've been working from home now for as many weeks as my hair's been growing long. So, yeah, it's you can tell by the length of it now. We've been here a while, but I'm enjoying
Absolutely.
it. And look forward to chatting.
What's now? You must. I just said earlier to you, you must be one of the busiest men in Aberdeen. But are you finding time to? Have you got into anything new during lockdown? Is there anything that you've discovered or gone back to?
Gone back to no. I tell you what, I've used it for because I've only been in step change. Well, actually, I say only. It's come up for 10 months, but it's been pretty full on since I came back. And we live in a 150-year-old house, and it's like everything gets old. You need more maintenance, right?
Yeah, totally.
So I've actually been cutting out some time, not much time, because I've been super busy at home, to catch up on some of the odd jobs around and make a house sort of the way it should be. So I've spent a lot of time doing DIY that I forlonged myself from for a couple of years, but now I'm back in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I had a look at what you guys are doing, and we'll come back to that in a second, what Step Change is doing today. But just taking a wee step back in time, you've been around the oil field patch for a few years, is that fair?
A few more than few, I would say, yeah. Hey, I probably most of my working life, even as an apprentice, I saw it coming. I served my time as an electrical engineer, actually, an amateur winder as they were called.
Oh yeah.
And I was in that period from going from fishing vessels to supply ships, and then to dive support ships, and then I knew the allure of my young buddies, going in as drilling hands and making great money and having lots of time off. And I'm thinking, I served my time and I've got to work every day. What's all that about?
Yeah.
So the allure of the oil industry back in the very early 80s was huge for me, and I just knew it was the right place for me,
And was it drilling that you originally went into?
No, it wasn't actually. I had the privilege of working for a company called BBC, and it wasn't the BBC News Channel. It was Brown Bevere Company, and they specialised in high voltage electrical drives and so on. And I'd managed to get work with them, and I went off as a service engineer, doing some pretty interesting electrical projects. Mm-hmm. And I realised pretty quickly that if you stay in that line of work, you're going to end up working much more hours than you work as a guy working in an equal rotation.
Yeah.
So I ended up going in, believe it or not, to some of the very early installations. I worked in, believe it or not, I did projects in all the Brents, all the Fortes, I did the Cormorants, I did the MCP01, I was everywhere, for short periods of time. So I got, and I use this in when I do some talks, I got a really good, almost a grounding in what offshore looked like, good, bad, and ugly,
Yeah. So
not the drill at all.
But then you start to sort of career through into drilling, and you've had senior roles in operations and things like that. So the step through to drilling, was that an easy one to make?
It was actually, because I'd left. I'd been working in commissioning work, and I ended up being part of the commissioning team for the Alwyn North platform when it went out. And they asked us to stay on once they went drilling as a maintenance spark, and I knew it inside out. It was a brand new platform. It had its challenges. It had an interesting, I'd say it was very interesting, because all the supervisory staff were French.
Right.
And they'd been given a crash course in English to come and work in the North Sea. Well, my drill crew were guys from Bucky and from Fyvie and from Finechte and all that. We didn't talk English. So I tell you, one of the biggest, let's call it biggest challenges we had was replacing the glass windows in the doghouse, because the French driller, Gerard was his name, was one of them. Joel was the other one. Got so frustrated using the talkback system, because he couldn't understand us, because we were deliberately talking Doric.
Yeah.
And he'd end up breaking the window with his hard hat. Of course, it happened. So we ended up, and we digress, but I think this is a funny story actually.
Yeah.
And we ended up employing a a young chap who was a friend of our driller, who was actually a glazier with AC Ewell in Aberdeen at the time. And he fast-tracked as a roughneck because he could change the windows in the doghouse.
Many a great career has been formed with a strange story, right?
Oh, God.
Incredible,
Yeah.
incredible. So you and
that's how I got into the drilling. Yeah, that's why I ended up in the drilling. I stayed on the drilling side after I moved across from the commissioning.
Okay. So you and I have got quite similar paths. I started off my offshore life in 1990 in drilling. In the electrical world, I was assistant electrician. My first job offshore was assistant electrician on the Ocean Guardian, and yeah, I know. And then you know, it was a strange old story. Dusty Miller, who was pretty much a legend in the industry at the time, hired me and said, "You've got a 3-month contract to go up and meet the Ocean Guardian and just be a sort of electrical dog's body." And I said, "I'll take it." And 16 years later, I was still with Diamond, and it was incredible. Changed careers, and one of the reasons why I thought it'd be great to have Steve on is because I took the rather, according to my father, rather radical move from electrical to health and safety offshore. And my story with step change really started around the origins of step change in 1997, when I was moving into health and safety. So we've had fairly similar careers. You went off and became much more senior and much more operational roles and things like that. But you've come around now, and you're executive director with step change and safety, which must be a very rewarding but very challenging role, particularly now, right?
Yeah, hey, it's one of those things that I got involved in step change and safety in 2004. Actually, when I became I'm going to say I was an operations manager at Noble Drilling, and I was taken aback of the calibre of people in the room and the commitment to safety in the room back in 2003, 2004. And by that time, I'd really although I've never been a safety professional, but from an operations management point of view and a VP point of view, I always had a very sort of passionate approach to health and safety, and we can talk about that in a minute why. And when I went abroad in 2010, that's when I became involved in as country manager in Brazil and all that. One of the things I knew I was going to miss the most was my engagement at a senior level in industry, with IEDC as the chairman and with step change being on the leadership team. So go full circle and move on another 10 years or so. When a position became available at step change and safety, I just couldn't think of a position I would like to have more than that, because it allowed me to go, okay, I can drop this sort of operational side almost and pick up on what's something I'm particularly passionate around for reasons that will become obvious, I would think. And also I can start giving back some of my knowledge and experience from all these places I've been fortunate enough to work back to the industry. It really gave me all, So it was a really rewarding, and I feel privileged every day. Despite how busy we are, I feel privileged every day to be doing what I'm doing. It's amazing,
No, it's fantastic, and I think what step change and safety stands for is fantastic. For the viewers that don't know about step change, or maybe just heard the title in the press or whatever, can you just sort of sum up what step change and safety is all about and what it is?
Yeah, so I refer to it with my staff and certainly with the leadership team. We are a unique organisation who are about a combination of the regulator, the UK regulator, the unions, the operating community, the contracting community, and also the workforce, all sit around the same table talking about things that are common to us all, which is the health and safety of the folks that work offshore. And there are many tables around this industry that perceive to do similar things to what we do, but we don't talk about virtually nothing other than how can we make this a safer place for the people offshore.
Yeah.
And if you think it's a place where we don't necessarily have to start with a blank sheet of paper, we're fortunate that our membership is 150 members almost in our organisation, bring their best practice or their good practice and are willing to share it and allow us to meld it into something that fits the whole industry. And as such, And because we've got such a good connection with the workforce, we have a trusted communication line with the workforce. And I think if you've got that credibility and access, you've got a much better opportunity to shape things at the sharp end of the spear than you have it from the office. And I think what we do, and some of the things we've introduced from our major accident hazards, our projects we did in helicopter safety in years gone by, our safe working essentials, competence, it involves our members, employees. We don't have a massive staff, but we have about 90 people working within our work groups on various different things throughout the year.
Right.
And I think the thing that makes us, again, not unique, but in particular very special and responsive is when you think about this COVID-19 pandemic, it hit us very swiftly.
Yeah.
We were able to react so quickly. We had, our first set of videos on our 6 Cs were introduced within a week. From the time that we sat, when I came up with the idea, to the time we published our first video was less than a week.
Wow.
And that's super responsive,
Yeah.
And I think if you do it in a manner where you don't necessarily, you accept it's not going to be polished, but it's going to be very authentic. It's going to touch the hearts and minds of the people you care about the most. And I think that's really what we've done through this whole COVID-19 thing, is just be relevant, point it towards the people that really matter for us, and try and assist in giving clarity of information that wasn't available. A lot of the information came out of the Oil and Gas UK management structure and strategic planning meetings, and we accepted early on, and thankfully we've got a great relationship with these folks at Oil and Gas UK, that we would be the communication conduit. We know our place, we know what we're good at, we know our strengths.
Yeah.
And if you focus on that, you get good traction, and I think that's what's happened through this whole short period of time,
Very much so. And definitely, let's come back to the COVID-19 efforts that you guys have been deeply involved in. I think one of the things that struck me about Step Change is, from being around and being in health and safety around the time of origin of Step Change and safety. So we used to work as a bunch of sort of disparate companies in the North Sea, particularly in drilling. So we would go from operator to operator, who would bring on their new set of ideals, policies, procedures, themes and focus areas. And over a period of a few years from establishment, we began to notice that there was one of the real benefits for us as a drilling team was that the operator would start to come on and question us and challenge us on whether we'd adopted the step change way of working. And then we would move to the next operator who would carry the same message on. So that was a real kind of, there's something really powerful here. So instead of having to, patch up all the processes and procedures and bin them for the next operator was coming on and speaking the same language, the step change language, and that's began to pick and grow momentum, which was really powerful. So yeah, we saw it as a great beneficial effort, and everybody seemed to be working together on it. So that's just snowballed over time, right?
Yeah, and I think you touched on a good point there. It is a language, it's a mindset, right? More than it is anything else. And at the same time, I was in the leadership team in Step Change and Safety. I was also chairman of the IEDC in the North Sea chapter, and I was fortunate enough to I always say mentored, because I'm a wee bit younger than these guys, but they would argue the toss about that. Chris Ness and Doug Halkett were also vice chairs on the leadership team at the same time. And between the three of us, we had such a good rapport and understanding. We knew whatever we talked about at the step change table, we could talk about the IDC chapter table as well. Sure. So the traction was unbelievable at the time, and all three of us went on to do great and good things for the right reasons, But that for me was a pretty special time, and I could never have reached the dizzy heights, if you want to say that. I say that loosely. Had I not been mentored very well during my early years at Noble Drilling, I think that for me really laid the land for me on what was important about your workforce and your crew, and what you would always talk about first. So if you couple that with my experience on Piper, I was in a mindset that I just knew what was important, despite being operationally focused, if you like, and that's never left me, and it probably will never leave me. And I've probably transferred it onto my boys. I have 5 young boys that all have a toe or a full foot in the industry, and I can see parts of my language as their language, which is what you really want, actually.
Yeah, totally. So Step Change, growing, 150 member companies. They've got all the projects that you're working on, all the international stuff that's happening and coming in and being put out to the UKCS. You've got all the guidance, all the work groups and all of that. And then all of a sudden, Q1 this year, we get hit with something that no one saw coming. So this COVID response from Step Change and Safety has been pretty immense. And as you say, you've acted as a conduit from the regulator, the advisory groups, and the member communities for the employees. So the whole, I was just reading through the frequently asked questions and some of the material that you've put out on this and some of the active stuff that you've been doing. The whole concept, I don't work offshore anymore. I'm still connected very deeply to offshore, but the whole concept of trying to keep a platform working or a drilling rig working with social distancing and all of that just seems like a complete, head fryer. So you must have been through some serious challenges recently.
Well, as I said earlier, we have been patted in the back quite a bit for our efforts in rolling frequently asked questions, current practice out, and all the rest of it. But that's coming through a huge funnel. It's almost like a hose pipe at time. It's on full. And what you have to do is go, okay, well, what we're really going to message here? What is the message? And I think the clarity of purpose for us was around, okay, the government could never foresee what we would have to do in an offshore installation to make what they wanted us to do in the way of lockdown happen, even though we're essential workers. And even the term essential workers created such a lot of noise in our industry, from, well, decommission is not essential, Yeah. Catering, yeah, we're going to down man because we're down manning, but catering is super essential because sanitizing, there were lots of things happening at the same time, and it was like drinking out of a hose pipe, Yeah. And eventually we got the 6 of us as 6 in the team, and we would spend an enormous amount of time going through frequently asked questions that we would receive from the unions, from Oil and Gas UK, from operators going, what can we do with all these? They must be the same coming from every different angle. So we were assimilating 5 different sources and going like, what's the key answer here? And how do we get it out quickly? So, but the thing that really we were conscious of was this is changing so quick. We could put an answer out today, and in the morning it's gone.
Yeah.
So we kind of tried to look ahead of that as well. And what I always said to my staff was, look, unfortunately, I've been out there. I know how impractical this can be, but it's not impossible. So let's really think about how do you man up a mess room with 50 starving men at lunchtime, and say, well, you'll just have to wait 15 minutes. It's all these little things. But I think if you look at the breadth of information we received from our membership, that made our job that bit easier, because people were just volunteering. Here's what we're doing. We're not saying it's the best. We're not saying it's good. Tell us, include it if you wish. We got, without mentioning company names, we got 50-page documents. We got 1-pagers as you just went, this is full of gold.
Yeah.
This is the one
Yeah.
So it was about screening and condensing and making sure that when I remember one weekend, right at the very beginning, I'd said to my staff, look, if questions come in, I'll obviously need to look at them because I'm the operational guy, if you like. So just send them to me and I'll have a look at them. And I'm thinking, oh my God, how do you keep pace with all these questions? And you just do, because many of them are repeats, they're just in a different fashion. But people were genuinely concerned about 2 things. One, about bringing it home, should they catch it offshore?
Yep.
And 2, what if I can't go out? What about my living? What about providing for my family? That was 2 things. So I think they may seem disparate, but they're not. They're all about keeping themselves healthy, so they can go and come and continue to work. So there was some tough love things we just couldn't talk about, and I think I've done that well and said, look, as much as I'm concerned about your your income and your salary. We just have to keep you safe, and the rest has to just happen, you know.
Yeah, sure.
And we had a let's call it, we had a run at it for a couple of weeks before the economic impact became very apparent, you know. And that's when things really changed, and people were like going from, why am I not furloughed, to, oh my God, I really need to work, you know.
Yeah.
So it just changed completely, and we've been lucky enough that we've managed to keep on the right side of most people. We've had some tough love responses, which I've intended deliberately to keep one-on-one. You know, I've never, if someone's came with a particularly personal and difficult question, I've answered it personally, went back to them and said, look, I'm talking confidentially. I would ask that you do the same. And
Sure.
to date, people have done that.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific. Are you seeing similar themes coming from the marine industry, the drilling industry, and the production world? Are you seeing similar issues, or do these separate industries, separate parts of industries, separate sectors have their own specific issues?
So I think the obvious things to me that became very apparent were when you get to the marine sector or you get into the international drilling side, people's rotations were becoming increased beyond belief. You know, people were doing 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And you'd think, how must that be to be out there? You know, and you get people saying, well, I have to be isolated for 2 weeks after I come back. And then when you think it, people were complaining, rightly or wrongly, it doesn't really matter, about having to go up the night before perhaps to get a temperature test.
Yeah.
Yet some folks were actually going to sit in a hotel for 2 weeks before they would go at the rig to do 6 weeks. You know, so some people are doing 12-week rotations in other parts of this world, and you think, wow.
Yeah.
That extremes are unbelievable. So I realised fairly quickly that for vessels and for rigs that are working abroad, to extend rotation in a difficult market was relatively easy because people wanted to keep working.
Yeah.
And you could argue that that's the way to keep people safe, is to keep them where they're unaffected, and they can continue to provide, you know, despite it being pretty stressful for them being away from their families. But that's what some folks have had to do.
It's just it's mind-boggling. So you've tackled, as an industry, a member-led work group, you've tackled crew changes, you've tackled helicopters, you've tackled accommodation offshore, you've tackled, I see you've tackled medical sort of separation as well, all the way through to hygiene offshore, social distancing where it can be done. Is there anything that you're working on now, which is the sort of next steps?
Well, as I said, Eric, we don't do anything alone. We want to work with others and help them communicate whatever they believe to be. And the thing that we're all now facing is, okay, we're going back to work eventually, and people refer to what is the new normal. You know, so, and if you think this last couple of days, there's been lots of announcements about unlocking and easing and so on and so forth. I just can't help but think we've been doing a lot of the things that need to be done offshore that are applying to facilities onshore. You know, and how do you make that good practice applicable to an onshore manufacturing site where you know you're going to have 50, 100 people in a factory? What would you do offshore where you have no choice but to continue to do what you have to do? So I think our website has probably got a lot of good guidance and frequently asked questions that would be just as applicable to some onshore heavy populated practices, you know, manufacturing or construction and so on.
Right. So that's something I never thought of before, which is just encouraging the onshore side of things to get onto your website and have a look at some of that best practice.
Yeah, I think, you know, I'm a strong believer that what we do is applicable to what goes on onshore. Yeah. It might need tweaked because of regulations and so on and so forth. But if you're looking after people's well-being and health and safety, it is readily transferable. It's just your environment you have to adjust. Right? And I can't impress upon people, my boys in my life are probably fed up with me talking about, just continue to think about alert principles.
Yeah.
You know, about keeping it as low as reasonably practical to exposure. And I think the government can never get to the level of detail it covers every establishment and working premises. But surely the individuals who are running businesses, if they've got that ethical approach to, right, we have to do the right thing, what does the right thing look like? It can be done, you know. And I think, yeah, it's going to cost a bit of money to put some segregation in and possibly do some changing a lift, shift setups and so on. But it can be done. You just have to have the will to do it, you know.
Steve, the with all of the noise that's going on around, all the data that's coming in, and all the massive upheaval in everybody's life around COVID, you know, from the outside, you could be thinking that this could be a distraction away from, you know, what Step Change was set up to do. I don't mean a distraction for Step Change, but the principles of keeping people safe, you know, different ways of working, keeping focused on what you're doing, and all of that. Is it possible that the COVID outbreak and all of the upheaval offshore could maybe take people's minds away a little bit from the sort of core principles of health and safety at work?
Yeah, and so if I go back to very early March, when I decided on a Sunday night that, okay, we need to revisit our 7 Cs, and we need to put a slant on it, how it's super important to keep these foremost in your minds despite COVID creeping into our industry. And that's why I chose to do the seven C's videos at the very beginning, because COVID for me is just another risk that is exceptionally high, from a fatality point of view, that you have to deal with in your environment. So if you think about our 7 C's, you know, commitment, change management, control of work, competence, complacency, communication, and obviously culture. If you think about those and how they apply when you're dealing with a pandemic outbreak of COVID-19 or whatever it may be, as long as you keep those in your mind and understand that you may be complacent because of your chain of thought being dragged away to your home life, bring yourself back on that place. Get focused on what you're doing. You know, take a time out to do that.
Yeah,
I talked a lot about over communicating your concerns and making sure that you've really covered the safety critical parts of your operation. So it was by no means a chance act that we chose to do those 7 C's videos at the very start of our COVID-19 intervention, because that for me was where we had to start, was reminding people that despite the potential of this disease of virus in our business, we all still were managing major accident hazard potential every day, you know.
sure.
So it just made sense to me that that was a point to start and labour upon that, and then move through the frequently asked questions, the social distancing, you know, how you manage your crew changes and so on and so forth.
So what's next for Step Change? If COVID wasn't with us, what were you guys working on, and are you still working on those despite the current situation we find ourselves in?
Yeah, so I did a very brief sort of article on one of the publications about onset of this year. We were planning around how we'd increase our engagement. We were setting up an OIMs network, an offshore installation managers network. We were repurposing our elected safety rep network with the sole purpose of making the communication with the workforce much more tangible for everyone. And I recognised before I joined Step Change and Safety, actually, and then that gave me the tools to make a difference, was that much of what Step Change and Safety does, and it's great stuff, it's absolutely fantastic what we do, but much of it doesn't get offshore. So we have to engage the people offshore. And people talked about leadership engagement. For me, all offshore installation managers are leaders.
Yeah,
they're offshore leaders, and that's who I really wanted to bring into the community. So we just appointed our steering group, our OIM steering group, when this all kicked off. Right. So we had our first physical meeting planned. So now we're doing virtual. We're doing the same with elected safety reps. We're going to do the focal points. So what were we doing or planning to do? We were increasing engagement, not inventing any new tools, but making sure that what we had was well used and was very available to the people that really matter, the people at sharp end. So we've not stopped. I have not, of the 6 people we employ full time, there's no way we could have furloughed anyone because we're all super busy.
Yep.
So we've all been working in the background about, okay, let's continue with our competence or safe working essentials, with our major accident hazards, a lifting forum. These are all things that we would plan to do. We're doing a big increase in mental health awareness this year. So now we were about to do our second physical event. We can't anymore. So now we're piloting today and tomorrow. We're piloting our mental health awareness champions course that can be done remotely. And if it works for us and we get it right, we'll continue to do that.
Great.
We've still got our portfolio at the back end of what we'll do to try and continue our event schedule for regional events and getting back offshore and doing boots on for safety and so on. So we haven't stopped. COVID-19 will be part of our daily bread going forward, but we've still got a load of other things we're prioritising.
Very good. I guess people can get a hold of you and your team through the website, stepchangeandsafety.net, I think it is. And they can get on there and check out all that you're doing and even send questions in and get in contact with you guys. That's the best way to get a hold of you, right?
Absolutely. Stepchangeandsafety.net, or you can visit our website and you can put questions through our website. We've a brand new website just been launched. It's much more user friendly. You don't have to be a member company to look at our website. You can go on, you can have a good browse around and you'll see what we've been doing in the way of COVID-19, but what we're also doing elsewhere. So for sure, get in touch. Very
good. Steve, we wish you and your team all the very best of success. We appreciate everything you do and good luck for the future.
Well, thanks a lot, Eric. We'll catch up later. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.